Hello and welcome to a Belmont Stakes edition of Handicapping with Stats Race Lens. I'm Dan Tordjman from America's Best Racing. Thrilled to be joined by TVG's Christina Blacker and reigning NHC Tour Rookie of the Year Joe Rosen. Both Christina and Joe, like myself, are avid users of Stats Race Lens. And we're going to look at how they might be utilizing Stats Race Lens on Saturday to pick winners and build tickets on a huge day of racing at Belmont. 10 stakes races, 8 Grade 1 races, all culminating with the Belmont Stakes. Also on the line here, manning the controls. You won't hear from him, but he's here helping us through this webinar. Is going to be Ellis Starr, the Uber capper, manning the controls here, navigating through the Belmont Stakes Saturday card. But let's kick it off with Christina. Christina, how are you doing, and what are you most looking forward to on Saturday?
Oh, I'm looking forward to so much. You know, it's been so exciting to kind of follow this Triple Crown season, the drama, the ups, the downs, and to see what War of Will can do to sort of put an exclamation point on the entire story as far as the actual Triple Crown races go. But one thing that I've just been such a fan of over the last, several seasons is how Martin Panza has stacked these big programs, these big cards in New York. It just becomes such a treat for the casual race fans that want to go see the stars of our sport, and then also for the hardcore handicappers that really want to dig into the stats, to the data, and try to make some money on these big days.
Agree. Yeah, year after year, it sort of feels like a mid-year Breeders' Cup Light to kind of get us ready for the second half of the season. And Joe, you're an owner with Little Red Feather Racing. I know that factors into your handicapping a bit. Generally speaking, how do you tackle a card like Saturday's card?
Well, it's just an amazing card. I mean, we have 8 Grade 1 races back to back to back. You won't ever find a card like this except first weekend in November for Breeders' Cup. You're seeing the best horses in the country and in some respects the world this Saturday in New York.
Absolutely. We're going to jump into all of the Grade 1 races briefly, and then we're going to do a deep dive into the Belmont Stakes. Before we do that, though, just a reminder, for a limited time, you can test drive Stats Race Lens for just $1. This applies to new customers only. You get a month of Stats Race Lens for just $1. You got to use code SRLM1S. So SRL for Stats Race Lens, M1S. The easiest way to get there is going to equibase.com and clicking on Stats Race Lens in the main navigation bar. So the main event is the Belmont Stakes. As I said, we'll get to it shortly. But first, let's see if we can find some winners on the undercard. And the Grade 1 action starts with the Just a Game Stakes. That's race 4 on Saturday. Chad Brown has won this race the past 2 years with A Raving Beauty and Antono. He's got a strong hand here as well with both Environs and Rushing Fall. Question is, can anyone stop Rushing Fall? The filly has won 7 of 8 career races. Only loss was by a neck, and she looked great in her lone 19 start at Keeneland in the Jenny Wiley. She also looks like she might be the controlling speed. So, Christina, let's start with you. Does Rushing Fall just run away with this one?
I think she does. I mean, I mentioned, the stars of our game, and she really is one of them and has been for the last couple of seasons. And pace-wise, it just looks like her race to go out there and control. I think she catches a very quality field. I take nothing away from the horses that will be chasing her on Saturday, but that's just it. They are going to be chasing her the entire way around there. I think if you're looking for a horse to maybe try and round out your exactas, or if you're playing some trifectas and you're trying to turn the short price into a better one with Rushing Fall, Scott Stormy is interesting for me. I think she's really coming on right now, coming into herself. I love improving 4-year-olds. And so I would look to her as maybe that underneath horse to be rallying late. And for my money right now, I mean, no one's riding better than Tyler Gaffalione. I'm such a fan of this young rider and how he adapts to any location that he happens to be at.
She did run real nicely last out, did sort of flatten late, got caught late, but she did show a nice turn of foot. Environs is another one to consider. I thought third U.S. start, broke poorly in that same race last out. Joe, any feelings on this one?
I mean, Rushing Falls is just such a quality horse. She can win from the front. She's won from just off the pace. As the song goes, all she does is win, 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 no matter what. And I would expect her to do the same this Saturday.
I love it. All right, Joe, I know you've got an opinion coming up in the next race. Race 5 is going to be the Ogden Phipps. This one looks like a 2-horse race on paper. You've got Midnight Bazoo for Bloom Racing and Mataket Stables, a perfect 3 for 3 this year, coming off a narrow victory in the Apple Blossom. Then you've got Come Dancing, who's sort of a new name, new player here for Blue Devil Racing, Carlos Martin. She has just been blowing away her rivals in recent months, won the Ruffian by 6.5 lengths. Joe, I know some of your opinion in this race is informed by the fact that you are an owner, so share some of those insights with us.
Well, I'm well acquainted with all these horses, as I'm one of the owners of Secret Spice with Little Red Feather. Secret Spice ran against Mopetism and in Kentucky last month. The other 4 all ran in races against each other. We had Come Dancing run and win in her last race. Midnight Bijou won in her last race against similar opponents here. I'm looking at Come Dancing as trying to defend her home turf there. She's a New York horse. I'm hoping to see her odds come down in this race based on home track favoritism. I think Midnight Bijou is just the quality horse of this field. I think she's the quality horse of the 4-year-olds and up in this distance. I'm hoping to catch odds better than even money in this race. I believe that Midnight Bijou will put everybody behind her in this race and just go out and win as she always does from behind.
Could certainly see that happening. Christina, any strong feelings here? Maybe a little bit of an upset anywhere, or you think it pretty much will chalk out?
I think it's probably going to chalk out, but my reasoning is because I thought the Apple Blossom, I loved watching that race, and part of the reason I loved watching it was because I'm just such a huge fan of Escape Clause, the Manitoba bred, the for Dawn Schnell. She's won 20 times in 31 starts. She'll be the number 4 horse coming up on Saturday. And I thought she just laid it out there in the Apple Blossom. And Midnight Bijou did defeat her that day. She was ahead by a nose on the wire. But I wonder, even though those two have had so much time since that race, it was on April the 14th, I just wonder if it took a little bit of the starch out of them, because I find that I've seen over the years, at times horses run a career best, a really big race over the track at Oaklawn, and it just takes them a while to get out of that. It takes them a while to come back and run their A race again. So while I think Joe is right, Midnight Bijou is the horse to beat the class of the field, I just wonder what, is going to be left at this stage following the Apple Blossom for both her and Escape Clause. And for that reason, I think Come Dancing just has the ability to go out here and wire them. As we were talking about Rushing Fall on the front end in the Just the Game, I think it might be the same type of case scenario for Come Dancing on her own on the front end in the Ogden Phipps.
All right, and you mentioned Escape Clause there a moment ago. The other thing to note about that race was that she was on the wrong lead for a good portion of the stretch, but she corrected late and was really there all the way with Midnight Bazoo. Seemed like she had plenty left in the tank, so she could be primed for a big effort on Saturday, and she's probably going to be your best price, obviously, when you look at some of the top contenders here. So let's move on now to the Jaipur, race 6 on the day. I'll share a couple of my own angles here. On paper, again, this looks like it comes down to just a couple of horses. World of Trouble, who's been just about unbeatable for the past year and a half, and Disco Partner, who has, of course, dominated this race in recent years, has won the last 2. And it was a neck away from coming in with a 3-race win streak here in the Jaipur. So Disco Partner and World of Trouble are your 2 obvious horses, but wanted to take a look at some prices that I was able to pull up utilizing some research and some data on Stats Raceland. So let's go to number 3, Dirty. If you put a line through the race at Aqueduct in early November, this is a horse who has been consistent as any. He's certainly going to get the acid test here, but that's a big number that he posted last out at Laurel. If you click on the chart, and this is a cool thing about Stats Raceland, you click on the chart, you don't really have to do much work here. It will circle all of the horses who have come back to win next out. So you see 2 horses have come back since that race to win, including Completed Pass, who's a very, very solid horse. As far as Dirty, he was beaten just 2 lengths by World of Trouble last August, and he's in much better form right now. So naturally, if you like World of Trouble, I think you've got to give a look to Dirty, and you're going to get a good price These aren't exactly this is specifically jockey Georgie Vargas, who is a Mid-Atlantic based jockey who I'm familiar with. He's not the kind of guy who's going to take a lot of that public money because people aren't as familiar with him, but he is extremely solid and has come up big in a couple of spots. So I like Dirty a lot here. The other one I wanted to look at is the 7-horse. Belvoir Bay ran a huge race in Dubai to finish second to a powerhouse of a horse in Blue Point. And what's important to note is Peter Miller has done a really great job of keeping his horses sharp, shipping in and out of Dubai. And you can test some of that looking at Stats Race Lens research. And so I pulled some up with Peter Miller looking at the past 5 years. Let's see if we can pull it up here. There it is. So Peter Miller, last 5 years, you could really customize all these searches. In turf sprint specifically, with all shippers in all stakes, that's the sample size right there, 27 starts. You got 4 wins, which may not sound that great, but consider horses shipping in and out. 4 wins, that's still a 15% win rate. But the bigger numbers here, the ROI, look at the ROI there, and look at the in the money finishes. 16 out of 27 of these horses have finished in the money. Belvoir Bay seems like a very logical play to me, has been a quality horse for a while now, and you have no concerns about a horse like this shipping into New York. So if you're looking for some value in the exotics here, along with World of Trouble and Disco Partner, I think Dirty and Belvoir Bay are 2 horses to consider. Christina, Joe, any strong feelings about a potential price in the Jaipur?
I'll jump in. I thought your point about Belvoir Bay was very good. She was going to be the horse that I was sort of intrigued by, and she really does run hard each and every time. I kept coming back to Ohm a little bit, the 2 for Pete Miller, just because I think this horse has a lot of ability. He always has, and what I respect is that they're going to try something new with him. I think what they're going to run into in terms of the trouble is if you kind of pick through his past performances, you look at his last win was in the Thunder Road back in February at Santa Anita. He seems to be at his best when he's able to make the lead. And on the cutback in distance and against some of these other horses, I don't think he's going to be able to do that. But I just think the changes here that are coming with Ohm and Rosario going aboard and Pete having the confidence to, for one thing, ship him to Churchill the first time he ran him in the opening burst, and then to go ahead and ship him again, he has to be showing more in the mornings than what we're seeing in the afternoon. So it kind of piggybacks off your angle there, Dan. I would say that both Pete Miller horses could be dangerous at a little bit of a price.
I agree with your choice of Belvoir Bay as well. I think you're going to see, and it depends what the pace is of this race. If somebody goes out quick early, it'll change the race a lot. If it's a slow pace, I think you'll see that Belvoir Bay will be in a very nice place and actually could hit the wire first.
All right, sounds like we've got something resembling consensus there. I know we definitely have consensus in the next race, race 7, the Acorn Stakes. You would think maybe one of us would land on the Kentucky Oaks winner, Serengeti Empress, but that's not the horse we landed on independently. We didn't consult each other, but independently, we all came up with the same horse in this race, 9-2 morning line, the 9 horse, CC. Christina, you've got some angles to show us, so I'll let you explain why CC might be a horse to look at.
I do, yeah. We're going to celebrate or commiserate together in the Acorn, all of us. CC is the horse that I'm most intrigued by, and there are a couple things that I wanted to point out via Stats Race Lens. I want to go to the chart from her very first career start, and that was against Maine Special Weights, and it's sort of also to show what you were pointing out earlier, Dan, is just the next out winners. This was clearly a good race. You can see several next out winners are highlighted for you, and to let you know what they did out of that last start. It was a hot race, so she was a pretty decent price that day. We can go back to the past performances on QC now, and she ended up being about 6-1 for Mike McCarthy in that first career start. She would come back in her next race, and she took on older fillies. And as much of a fan as I was of her that day, I was on air for TVG for the race, and I kind of had a feeling she might get beat just because there were some multiple winners, and it was a big ask to go ahead and put her against the older horses. But with the way that the races were coming up, it was just the only spot that they could, have her in. But I did notice that if you see that Equibase speed figure, that she earned out of that performance. It was the highest for her herself and also for horses in this race. So it goes a long way. I wouldn't let that defeat kind of discourage you from her at all. I also wanted to take a look at the True Odds page, and this is something that I consult quite a bit. And I do so mostly when I'm talking about turf sprints and I want to see who's finishing, but we are going the one-turn configuration here, and I wanted to sort this via the late pace figure because you can see CC is right up there at the top. She finishes her races very quickly, even though she has that tactical speed and she's on the front end. And then lastly, the angle that I was able to pull with regard to trainer Mike McCarthy, he's just been one of those consistent guys since he took out his training license and left Todd Pletcher's operation, but he's gotten better with each year. And a big part of that is just the stock and the quality that he's been given. So I pulled this in the last 2 years, talking about 3-year-old females, and he's right up there with a really strong win percentage, 22% winners, 47% of the time they are hitting the board. And it's a strong sampling as well. There's 72 starters, 16 of them making their way to the winner's circle. So I'm seeing good things from Mike McCarthy, good things from CC. And I think that she's going to have the ability to rate from that outside post. I think she's drawn very well because there is so much speed in this race. I mean, there is no stop in Serengeti Empress. She is going to be on the front end from that inside post, and she will have some company up there on Saturday. So it's CC for me, and I know that you guys are right there with me in the top selection here.
Yeah. Joe, agreed?
Not much to add. I mean, it's all right there on Stats Racelands. The only thing I would toss in there is that I'm very familiar with Lady Ninja. This horse that beat CC last time out has been a late bloomer. She is a fantastic horse and just caught CC in the last race. I think CC is going to be a great price out there in New York. West Coast shipper, very lightly raced, obviously, and I'm hoping to get a good number on her.
All right, let's move on to the Woody Stephens race 8 on the day, Saturday. With the exception of American Anthem back in 2017, this is a race that has pretty consistently over the past several years provided some decently priced winners. Interested to hear if you guys have landed on any prices here. I know Christina has looked at this race. I just wanted to give one more shout out to my Maryland people. And since I follow Laurel so closely, you look at the horse who's been doing most of his running at Laurel. That's Wendell Fong. Again, another Jeremiah Engelhardt, Georgie Vargas team up here. But taking a look at the stats race projection here, I think this is important as well. We were just looking at this page a few moments ago for the previous race. And you can see that there's a little bit of there's a note there underneath the projection chart that says it looks like there will be some quick early fractions. And I've got to agree. I think that pace is going to be super hot as it has been the past several years. Much better. Landeskog will both be pressing early. Would imagine Complexity and Mind Control won't be too far off of it. And there you go. You could just see how, basically stack up the pace right there. And so while I don't love the 11 post for Wendell Fong, I think he's got the tactical speed to get in position from that outside post, pick a spot. I think he might get overlooked again based on the Laurel preps, but he's beaten some pretty nice horses, including Call Paul, who's a multiple graded stakes winner, beat Call Paul last out. Even more encouraging was the way he was running late. I thought Wendell Fong was really doing his best running late, so stretching out to the 7 furlong distance might be right up his alley. So Wendell Fong for me would be a price play here. And I think based on what we just saw from the pace projector, it's just a matter of him not losing too much ground and being able to kind of find a spot under Georgie Vargas. So that's my thoughts on the Woody Stephens. Christina, I know you said you looked at this race a bit, right?
I did, yeah. And I think this is going to be probably one of the opportunities for the best price of the day. I just think the longer I look at it, the more I can make a case for so many of the horses in here. I'm very intrigued by Complexity, the number 4, just because he was really off to a flying start in his 2-year-old season, and then, lost it all in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but we haven't seen him since then. He's the son of McLean's Music, who's just brilliant himself, but he's one of those that, as you say, is going to stack up as far as the pace goes. The horse I kept coming back to is the 2, Much Better, for Bob Baffert. And I find it interesting that Bob continues to kind of ship this horse to New York. And as different as Belmont Park can be to Aqueduct or to anywhere else. You know, he may not have gotten there in the Gold Fever, but that was over a sloppy track. On Saturday, they're going to take the blinkers off. I think that he's been tinkering with this horse a little bit and trying to get his best, and I have a feeling they want to take the blinkers off. They want to drop him back and see if he can make that one run. And I think the ability has always been there for this son of Pioneer of the Nile. So Much Better is going to be the horse for me, but it's one of those races that, you know, if you are beginning at pick 4 that starts here, I really think you need some coverage. I think you need the 1. I think you need the 2 before you can go outside to mind control. I mean, I just think this is one of those races where anything really can happen on Saturday.
Yeah, given recent history, I would not be surprised if we do see a price here. Of course, you made a very good case there for Much Better as well. Joe, is this a leg where you're going to spread out a little bit?
I think you have to. There are just too many quality horses, but a lot of the horses do have questions. As Christina just said, Complexity hasn't raced in what amounts to 7 months now. Obviously ready to come back, but what do we expect on Saturday? I just don't know. If I'm leaning anywhere, I'm leaning towards Honest Mischief. Not so hot on the post, but has left from the one post before in prior races. But you've got Chad Brown as the trainer. You've got Javier Castellano as the jockey. This horse does like to run late, as you can see by the late pace on the stats that True Odds part of the page. And if I was leaning towards one horse, it would probably be Honest Mischief. But you have to get coverage here. There's just too many horses.
Yeah, I thought Honest Mischief did look a little sneaky down there on the rail as well. It's going to have to work out a trip, but certainly one to look at. All right, we've got 2 races before the big one, and the next one might actually be the big one in a lot of people's eyes. This is hands down the most star-studded race of the day and one of the most highly anticipated runnings of the Met Mile in recent memory. 8 of the 9 runners in here have at least one Grade 2 win. You've also got 6 Grade 1 winners. And so this time we'll kick off with Joe. Joe, where do you go? I mean, again, you any number of classy horses to go with here. Where are you leaning in the Met Mile?
Well, I'm leaning towards McKenzie and Matoli. McKenzie, you've got a Baffert chipper. Slowly goes about his business every race. He's only been off the board on one occasion and that was the Breeders' Cup last year in the last 2 years. So I think that you have a very quality horse there, just tremendous quality. And then you have the 3 Matoli, who's done nothing wrong in the last 6 races, just gone out and just won every single race easily. I think you have to start with those 2 horses and then see what you can find with the others as to if you can find a price to beat them.
Interesting here will be the way the pace sets up. Of course, these are horses who have overcome adverse pace setups in the past. You've got a lot of classy horses, including Thunder Snow, who we just saw go by the board here, 2-time Dubai World Cup winner, who reports from New York. I've been out at Belmont this week. Reports from everyone who's looked at the horse say he's moving about as well as he's ever moved before. Christina, where are you looking here for potential winner in the Met Mile?
I think your point about the pace is what's really going to, separate them. And that sounds kind of obvious because it happens in every race. Pace makes the race. But speed-wise, I think the fastest horses are Coal Front because he's committed from the inside. I kept wanting to choose him, but I think the inside post just really kind of hurts him. Matoli is just lightning fast. And as we were talking with Serengeti Empress, there's no stopping him. And I don't see the distance as any problem for him either. I think if any horse is going to go out there and wire the field, he's the one that can do it. Promises Fulfilled can be equally as fast early on, but I'm not sure that he wants to see out the full 1-turn mile along with Matoli. So I see those 3 horses really lining up on the lead. And the question at that point becomes, can Matoli withstand that kind of heat and keep on going? We will find out on Saturday. But I think the Trip is going to be that horse that can sit kind of just off of those 3. And I think that Trip falls to a couple of horses. It falls to McKenzie, the 2 for Bob Baffert, Mike Smith, who is the class of this race. And, looked back at his Malibu in December of 2018 to kind of round out his 3-year-old season. And that was a brilliant performance around one turn at the 7 furlongs, one shorter than he's going to be facing on Saturday. But I also, these are much deeper waters. This is, as you say, one of the most star-studded fields of the weekend. And as good as McKenzie is, I think he's better at 2 turns. I respect Bob Baffert and what they're going to do here in cutting him back, but I just think he's the 2-turn horse, and he's shown that. And we see that time and time again from the street fences. The numbers and the statistics continue to get better and climb the farther the distances go with them. So for me, the horse I ended up on was Firenze Fire, the 7. He's the horse for course at Belmont. He's 3 for 3, over that track. He comes off a win in the run Happy Last Out. And the knock against him is that, on the occasions that he has run at Belmont, he has not run against horses of this caliber. I'm, very aware of that. But he's clearly at his best at Belmont going one turn, and I think he fits the perfect trip on Saturday.
I was waiting for you to circle back to Firenze Fire. I'm with you there. Look, he might take some of that local money and some of the on-track money. Everyone knows Firenze Fire loves Belmont, but he might get overshadowed by some of the other names we've covered here, horses who have kind of shown up in bigger spots. But when it comes to Belmont, as you said, in a spot like this, a one-turn race, Firenze Fire, he's just been absolutely unstoppable. You're going to get a decent price. I think that 4-1 is maybe a bit short. I think with some of the others in here, hopefully we get something closer to 5 or 6-1. But I'm with you on Firenze Fire. So let's move on to race 10, the Manhattan. The story here is bricks and mortar, a likely single on a lot of those late pick 4 and pick 5 tickets. But if you're looking to cash a big ticket, you're probably looking for a way to beat bricks and mortar. Do you go to one of the other Chad Browns, maybe Olympico, who looked spectacular in his U.S. debut last out, cruising in the Fort Marcy? You've also got Chad's Arlington Million winner, Robert Bruce. Will he finally catch a firm turf course and return to his Grade 1 form? Christina, let's go back to you on this one. Anyone beating bricks and mortar?
It's hard to see, for my money, anyone able to defeat him. And going into the Turf Classic at Churchill last out, I kept kind of wanting to make a case for Curbon, and I think Curbon ran his race, but he's just not as good as bricks and mortar. So for me, he's going to be the horse on top. But, the horse that I'm interested in and looking at as far as the price is down at the rail and Raging Bull. I've just always been a fan of him, and I think putting the blinkers on is really going to help. I also like Javier Castellano jumping aboard this horse, and that's not to take anything away from Joel Rosario, but I think what we see from Rosario time and time again is that sort of patented off the pace, late roll down the middle of the track. I think Castellano might suit this horse a little more, and if they're putting the blinkers on and trying to maybe make him a little more tactical, see if they can find just a way to get a couple more lengths of speed out of him early on and put him in that striking position. I think Raging Bull is sort of the sneaky horse from Chas Barn that might jump up with a big one and perhaps give his stablemate a bit of a run for his money.
Raging Bull 10-1 right there, as we just pointed out. Joe, anyone getting past bricks and mortar?
I don't think so. I think the only way that's going to happen is somebody just going out and trying to steal this race and going out quick. And if I had to choose a horse to do that, it would be the 9, Ipical. I think that is about the only way you're going to see bricks and mortar actually lose this race, is to fall too far behind and actually just somebody go steal the race, because it's projected to be a slow race, as to at least the start, a slow pace. That I think if Ipical goes out there and runs fast, might put everybody away without as they wait for that horse to just fall back to everybody else.
All right, well, that would certainly spice up the late sequence there. As I said, a lot of people are going to be singling bricks and mortar. So when you construct your tickets, might be a wise thing to play a smaller ticket or a backup ticket using maybe one or two of these prices that we just mentioned here, Epical, Raging Bull, and one for me who I thought could maybe surprise here. It's strange to say a surprise, but Robert Bruce, just seems to have kind of, not lived up to what we thought we'd see after that Arlington Million win. But again, you look at those the turf conditions he's caught in each of his last few races. Expected to be rock solid firm on the turf course Saturday at Belmont. So if he can get back to his running, to his preferred surface there, his preferred conditions, maybe he comes through at a little bit of a price. All right, let's go to the big one, Belmont Stakes, race 11 on Saturday. Let's start off, as we have with a couple of these races, talking about the pace here. The speed of the speed is drawn inside. That's Jovia. Got the rail, and we know he's going to go. All things being equal, you got to imagine that Tax, if he breaks cleanly, will be pretty close to the pace. So here we go. Ellis right now just set it up for us, kind of give us an idea of how this pace might stack up. And it's showing you Jovia will be out there, out front in all likelihood, with probably some daylight between him and Tax and War of Will. You've then got Spinoff. And then Everfast kind of coming in about sort of mid-pack there, Intrepid Heart. He's a little bit of a mystery. We'll see how he breaks on Saturday. But you've got to figure War of Will, Tacitus, sitting off the pace. And the question is, what have they got in the tank? Obviously, in years past, when you have a horse that has done the Derby and the Preakness, as War of Will has coming into the Belmont, you have some concerns. I'm wondering what you, Joe, think about that. War of Will, potential bounce candidate, I've heard, and also potentially just might be out of gas. What do you think about him? And then we can work our way into some of your angles here.
Well, if not for what happened in Kentucky, it's very possible that we could be we would have been talking Triple Crown again. War of Will was, in my eyes, was the horse moving the best around that turn in Kentucky, and would have been there at the end, I think. I don't know if he would have gone into the wire first, but would have been there. Tacitus was also moving there, so I think it really is a two-horse race, but you're not going to get great odds with either horse.
Mm-hmm. Christina, what do you think just specifically on this question as it relates to War of Will? You gotta start at some point. You have a big enough field here. We got to toss maybe a couple of these horses. Is War of Will one that you would consider tossing, or are you completely sold and convinced that he's the best horse in this crop?
I'm definitely not tossing him. I see where, you look through his past performances and they haven't taken their foot off the gas pedal, but I think that's something that Mark Casse does really well. I think if you look back at some of the big horses that he has campaigned, he's been able to get long seasons out of them and really does know his horses. And let's not forget also, they had that little hiccup, in the Louisiana Derby. They had to sort of stop on him a little bit, rest him up. I think he was a fresh horse coming into Kentucky, as hard as that is to say, when you think about his campaign. But there was more time between the Louisiana Derby and the Kentucky Derby than many of the other prep races and many of the other horses that were coming in to Kentucky. So he's not a toss for me at all. I do think he's going to run his race. I can see him winning, but in the sort of vein of trying to help anyone that's listening or, playing around with the stats, Raceland's data, the horse that I thought was worth pointing out is the 6, and that's Spinoff. And mostly because when you're talking about the Belmont, this is the race that pedigree comes into play more so than anything. That last eighth of a mile is where it really does catch up. And so very often when I'm talking about races at this distance, and even at a mile and an eighth, really, I will pull the data as far as the sires go, and I will customize the distance. And what I want to know is how the offspring of hard spun do when we're talking about horses that are running from 10 furlongs to 12 furlongs. So that's how we've sorted this out. And you can see this is a high win percentage, 23% win percentage for hard spun. So he's always a sire that I'm very intrigued by in these circumstances. And then you can also go to the right-hand side of the page to show all. And so this will give you the data for the sires of each and every horse in this race. And it's been well publicized, and I think we've seen it, in a lot of headlines this week, that Taffet looking to go ahead and become the sire that has the most Belmont winners or equal that record. He's represented by 3 horses in the field this year. So you're going to have to come back to that once again with regard to Taffet. Any of his horses, for me, will get, a little bit of an extra look. So Intrepid Heart gets an extra look. Of course, Tacitus gets an extra look as well. But I think Spinoff is kind of an interesting horse. I'm willing to throw out the Derby for him just because it was a sloppy track and he really seems to have never, got his feet underneath him that day. But when it comes to the distance and how the pedigree will play out, I think he's one of those that could thrive. And I also, just for the interest of people that are, new to stats, I'll always pull up the Dam's PPs as well. It's right there, and you can see it's been well publicized. Zaftig and all of her accomplishments. The same can be said for Tacitus with close hatches. I mean, it doesn't get any better than Tacitus with his pedigree as far as this race goes, but it's not really helpful to point out 9-5 for you. So I think Spinoff is maybe that other horse that if you're looking to use the data to show you who has the pedigree to get this 1.5 mile, Spinoff is that wild card price for me. I don't think he's the horse that I'm going to pick on top, but if I'm playing any tickets, I'm going to include him. And if I'm playing any exactas tries, he's going to be a horse that's in the mix for me as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree on Spinoff as well. Todd Pletcher made no secret about the fact that Spinoff did not love the wet track. Derby Day just didn't react to it well at all. And you go back before that, I mean, ran a pretty big number in the Louisiana Derby, certainly a bounce back candidate. And you mentioned that pedigree. You did a great job there, by the way, of just kind of walking us through a lot of the data that's available on Stats Raceland, specifically the pedigree data. I don't care who you are, how great your memory is. There's no way you're going to be able, kind of off the top of your head, to recall a Dam pedigree for each horse in every race here. And so, this is an extremely helpful tool, especially for people like me who could use a little help when it comes to kind of recalling and pulling up different pedigree data. And speaking of pedigree, you mentioned Tapit. 3 of the last 5 Belmont Stakes winners, with the exception of our Triple Crown winners over the past 5 years, have been by Tapit. Joe, I know you've got your eyes on 2 Tapits here, both of them, Intrepid Heart and Tacitus. Tacitus is an easier case. You don't need to convince us. Intrepid Heart, let's hear a little bit about what your thinking is about Intrepid Heart.
Well, to begin with, you've got Todd Pletcher as the trainer. Doesn't get much better than that, obviously. Intrepid Heart went off as an even money favorite on the same track back in the Peter Pan on May 11th. He stumbled badly at the start and it cost him any chance at that race. He finished a game third, but part of that was based on traffic in the stretch, so I wouldn't really put the third place finish against him. As we already talked about, we have a Tapit horse here, fantastic history. He's also the grandson of the 1997 Belmont champ, Touch of Gold. When you look at at his dam, Flaming Heart, she's had 4 horses reach the track and has a pretty decent win percentage of 21%. There's just a ton to like about Intrepid Heart, ton of talent all the way through. There's also 2 very positive race angles here. Todd Pletcher has a decent win percentage when a beaten favorite comes back in the next race. And it's also Intrepid Heart's 3rd race off a layoff. So no matter what, I'll be including this horse in any exotic. And depending on the odds, he might even be my selection. Another horse that I'm really looking at as a key horse is going to be Sir Winston, the 7. Coming out of that same Peter Pan race, Sir Winston got out of the gate a little slow as well, and early in the race was 11 lengths back. He was rolling better than any horse in the stretch, and that was easily the best race of his young career. He passed all but the winner. This horse is bred to go long. There's no doubt he'll be able to go the 1.5 mile distance. He'll probably relish it as well. And most importantly here, you've got Rosario on top of him. He finishes in the money more than any other jockey. He's just one of the best in the game today. And again, horse history, his granddad, Sir Winston's granddad is Fleet Alex, who won this race back in 2005. So I think you've got 2 horses that will come from behind here and actually really push the 2 favorites at the wire.
On the point of coming from behind, interestingly, this year, I think maybe more than any other year that I can remember, was at the post draw earlier this week, and Todd Pletcher Belmont, Mark Cassidy, and Dale Romans were all up on stage and kind of just talking about pace and how pace comes into play in the Belmont Stakes. And they brought up a point that I think we've all known for a while, but we still somehow kind of instinctively don't necessarily live by it. And that's a lot of the horses that come into the Belmont with their prior race having closed a lot of ground late, whether it be in the Derby or in the Preakness, for example, like Everfast, or as you mentioned here, Sir Winston in the Peter Pan, they don't fare as well as you think they might. So logically, you would think, well, more distance, they should, they should do well with more distance. But Mark Cassidy, I think, made the point specifically, they're all getting tired once they hit about 1 1/8 or so. And so it's essentially where you are at that stage. There's only going to be a couple of horses in the race who have the ability, based on their pedigree, to take that next step forward. Christina, interested to hear where you stand on that and whether you might avoid a certain type of runner based on running style in the Belmont.
I think it's a great point, and I love listening to trainers when they can talk about the intricacies of not only pedigree but a specific racetrack. And I think what compounds that is when you think about Belmont and this 1.5-mile oval, horses, they're going to run on their left lead or their inside lead as they're turning. Then they switch to their right lead for the stretch and down the back stretch as well. So when you're dealing with a race with this type of circumference, they are going to be running on the turn and on their inside left lead so much more there at Belmont than they do anywhere else, any other racetrack in America. And so I think a horse that has that stamina built into the pedigree, for one thing, has the upper hand. And also a horse that trains at Belmont, a horse who has those muscles conditioned each and every day, from the jog, from the gallop, and the breeze, to run those turns at Belmont and to know when to switch and to have just a physical conditioning to compete over this track. It's, they say the test of a champion. It really is. And it goes down to the simplicity of the actual racetrack and just how long they're running left, running right. I mean, it's the same thing for any of us. If we're going to go out and train for, a marathon, if you're running on the beach and you're running down near the water where the sand is hard, you're going to go a lot further than if you're running up in the deep sand. And they call Belmont Big Sandy for a reason. I think horses that have excelled there in the past and have the ability to be training there in the morning leading up to a big race like this have a little bit of an upper hand.
And speaking of training in the morning, one horse that I want to bring up, just because he's a mystery for a lot of people, I know some people might auto toss him, some people might auto use him because they don't know what to expect. In terms of training in the morning, one horse, I tweeted this out the other day, certainly not been poetry in motion. That's Master Fencer, the Japanese horse who obviously ran, I think, a better than expected Kentucky Derby. Joe, start with you, and then Christina, you could chime in as well. Wondering if either of you give a shot to Master Fencer on Saturday.
Well, barring what happened, my understanding at the May 29th work is that Master Fencer just did not look well after the work was over. I don't doubt that the horse can make the distance, but based on those reports, it's just hard to put money on the horse, not knowing if he's 100% ready for this race. I don't believe that there's a question of him being sound. I just don't know if he is ready for this race based on that work.
And for me, he's not really a horse that I am too interested in come Saturday either. I think he's kind of scrappy, and I say that in a good way. He just keeps coming. He's very determined. But I also think that there's a case to be made for the fact that the floppy track might have really moved him up in the Derby. And he, yes, came from so far off the pace. And I think Julian Leopard, knows Churchill so well, was able to thread through traffic. And visually, he did make up a lot of ground. But you have to keep in mind that some horses are going to like that track and some horses aren't. And I think it might have been a little bit of a deceiving run to the eye to see what he did in the Kentucky Derby over a sloppy track. I don't believe he can replicate that over a fast track at Belmont.
All right. Well, let's go around the room here. We'll start with Christina. What I'd like to hear is your top three in the Belmont Stakes and how you might suggest playing the Belmont Stakes. To anyone listening here, how you would structure your bet. So your top three and how you might bet the race.
hold my feet to the fire for this one. I think Tacitus is going to be the horse that I ultimately put on top, as I said, just when it comes to his pedigree, when it comes to his trainer, when it comes to the fact that he's there at Belmont. This is his home base. He just keeps getting better and better. And I thought he had some trouble in the Kentucky Derby and ran a very credible race. I think he is going to be the horse I put on top. In behind him will be Spinoff for me, who I showed you the angle, and that's from Todd Pletcher's barn, the son of Hard Spun. I think he is also improving, so he will be my second selection. And then I think Will gets a piece of it. So overall, I find it to be pretty chalky with the top two selections. I do think that they are the class of the field and they do stand out, but Spinoff will be the horse that I'll throw in there to kind of help out with the value a little bit. And then just crazy kind of wild card as well as Tax for me. I'm willing to forgive his Derby. He's another one that is bred to get the distance. So if I think you're going to get more than the 15 to 1 on him. Perhaps with Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard, the price stays a little bit lower than it would be, but I think you'll get every bit of that 15, if not higher, for Tax. So maybe use those two, Tax and Spinoff, to try to create a little value around the two choices in Will and Tacitus.
All right, Joe?
Well, I'm not too far off from what Christina just said. I believe Tacitus is going to win this race, so I would put Tacitus on top. My second choice is going to be Sir Winston, for reasons I've already stated. And just like Christina, I think War of Will get a piece of this as to the top three. And also, like Christina, my wild card in this whole thing would be Tax. We've talked about New York horses. This is a New York horse. This is home turf for this horse. And trains on this track. And great jockey. And any odds better than what the adjusted true odds on Stats is going to be, and I will have money on Tax for the exotics. For me, I don't. As to a wager, there's not much money to be made on Tacitus, in my opinion, on a regular win bet. So I'm going to try to play exotics here. I probably will do some type of exacta boxes with Tax or Winston and Intrepid Heart, somewhere paired up with War of Will and Tacitus, and really hope for something from one of those three long shots at more than 10 to 1. Hope that they get on top and maybe even get lucky and go 1-2 that way.
All right. Well, since I'm a little bit of a reacher myself, just ask my wife. I'm always reaching, and I could go with Tacitus. I logically I think Tacitus makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go with the other Tappet. I'm going to go with Intrepid Heart. I think I like the fact that he's lightly raced and that he stands to improve. Don't love the equipment change going into a race of this caliber, but based on everything I've heard from Todd Pletcher and everything I've seen so far with the cleaner trip, I think Intrepid Heart's going to be tough. And if I'm going to throw out one just sort of way out of left field play at a big price that I think you might want to at least include in your Superfecta tickets if you're playing Superfectas, I like Jovia. I made the point earlier. I think I keep going back to, I'm not comparing this horse to Tara quite yet, but I keep going back to all these years where I throw out horses that look like cheap speed and they at least hang on for a bit. I think Jovia has that potential, especially if he shakes loose, which I think he will. And I think a lot of them are going to be backing up. He might not necessarily be accelerating as they're coming off the turn, but he might just have just enough in the tank, I think, to hang on for a slice. So I'm going to probably play some tries and supers with Tacitus, Jovia, Intrepid Heart, and Christina. I like Spinoff as well, so I'm going to throw Spinoff into a couple of tickets. I think that just about does it. Really appreciate Christina and Joe taking the time here to go through all of these graded stakes races on Saturday. Incredible card at Belmont Park. 8 grade ones, kicks off in race 4 with just a game, and just goes all day long. Great betting opportunities. Just want to send out one more reminder. For a limited time, you can test out Stats Race Lens for just $1. This applies to new customers only. You get a month of Stats Race Lens for $1 when you use code SRLM1S. You can just go to equibase.com and click on the Stats Race Lens tab. Thank you again to Christina and Joe. Thank you again to everyone at Equibase and at Trackmaster for putting this on. Good luck to everyone playing this weekend. We'll see you.